Okay, we're here in my other magnum, and I did blue lights instead. And I'll show you a trick that I used on this style to get the AC defrost and recirc light to light up better. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, here's the controls to my other magnum. It's again the same dual climate control, same thing as the other one. The difference is it's a thin profile. It doesn't have the white, thick back housing to it like the other one did. So to get it off of the dash bezel, same thing, 4mm screws here, and then 2 screws up here. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so remove your 4 screws, and then pull this guy off just like that, set that aside. Now we're going to need that T10 star bit again, hex bit, whatever it's called, and remove these 2 screws here. And they are some fairly long screws, probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch long. Okay, now this style is a bit more tricky. You have a plastic tab there, 3 along the bottom there, 1 on the side there, and then 3 more on the top there. It's pretty tricky. You pretty much have to start along the top or the bottom, and you work your way around the side this way, and then come back around to the other side. It doesn't matter if you start top and go this way, or bottom and go this way, or vice versa. Doesn't matter which way, but you will probably need 2, maybe 3 flathead screwdrivers or flat pry tools of some kind. I'll probably use my knife, stick that in there, and I'll probably take another flathead screwdriver, stick it in here, and just work my way around. And I'll show you the insides of what I'm talking about. So I've used 2 flathead screwdrivers, small ones, to pry underneath there to break these 2 tabs free. Then I'm going to use my knife to try and break this one free, and then see if I can get it one-handed here. Just kind of gently pry and get those tabs to come free. Okay, so I just popped it free, and you have that lock there, 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 and on the bottom there, there, and there. You got to get those to break free from the inside of the housing here. Okay, again, we're going to have to flip it over. Be careful of these pins here. Do not bend these at all. These have to go straight through the back of the housing here. So that way when you plug in the plug from the car, those pins will go straight into the plug on the car side. So be careful not to bend those pins. Again, this style, you want them all the way down to the far left-hand side. And again, just pull them straight up. With the other style, with a thicker housing, you're going to want this 1 or 2 clicks from the far left. But on this thin style, you're going to want it all the way to the left for those tabs to get through those slots. And then you can lift this straight up, and yours will have a clear plastic piece in here. This is to help disperse the light around. But when I replaced the LEDs inside mine, you just had hot spots where these LEDs were. So you had a hot spot here, 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 and here, and here. That was it. These did not light up very well. So I tried sandblasting these, or this plastic piece at work, to try and help diffuse the light more. It helped some, not a whole lot. But I did the same technique with the LEDs and the resistors, But to get the AC, the defrost, and recirculate to light up better, I basically took, these are all 5mm LEDs, right? So I took a 3mm LED and wired it in to the leads, twisted it around the leads on the 5mm LED. So it's seeing the same, so the LEDs are wired in parallel, but the resistors are wired in series. So it comes in through the first resistor, and then it splits to go to both LEDs, goes through the LEDs, comes back together, then it goes through the second resistor back into the board. That's the flow of power through these LEDs and resistors. So again, I did the same. Bend the lead over the resistor, covered it with heat shrink, and the same thing with the 3mm LED. I covered that with heat shrink so that cannot short out on the board at all either. Now, if you notice, there's a square box printed on the circuit board there, and I will show you how this one had, how the factory filament bulbs were on this board. Okay, so the factory filament bulb had this plastic housing around the filament bulb, and then the circuit trace, if I remember right, came down through the center, back up, and it followed the trace around the housing and then soldered into the copper pad on the circuit board here and here. And there was just barely enough of the pad hanging outside of the housing, where I was just barely able to get my soldering iron in and touch the side of that pad just enough to barely break it free, and so that way I could just barely melt it and break this trace free from the circuit board. So once I was able to heat it up, I was able to take the soldering iron and just kind of push the LED up, or the filament bulb housing, plastic housing, or whatever the heck this is. I was able to just touch the pad, melt it just enough to lift up and break free, and then come back to the other side, just touch it just enough to pop it off that way. That was a style bulb. This is a side view with a view of where the traces were, and this is a top view. The bulb was in the center, the traces came down, back out through the top, and wrapped around the outside here. So that was how I was able to break the solder free with a soldering iron. So once you get that off in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions, once you really get those 5 positions free, then you can go back and solder the LEDs on the same way I did in the previous video, with the add-on of these 3 LEDs here to light up your 3 buttons here. If you notice, the LED is right here, but if you flip it over, there's no, what you call it, through hole pins sticking out the other side. It's all surface mounted on the top of the board here. So there you can see the lead coming from the resistor coming out here, and then the resistor connected to that LED right there, and then coming out the other side of the LED goes into the resistor, and then the other wire of the resistor coming out from the back side and soldering onto the board there. So again, that's how I have my LEDs soldered on. And then these bulbs, the factory bulbs, had this blue film, which coupled with the soft yellowish light from the factory bulb shining through this blue filter, gives you the green color, the factory green color. And because the LEDs I went with were blue blue with blue diffuser that would just help diffuse and spread the light more through this factory diffuser, which didn't really help diffuse when you have LEDs like this. So again, I still have some hot spots, and then plus the addition of the 3mm LEDs here, I was able to get the 3 buttons here to light up better. So then to put it back together, just flip it over, and see, do I have this right? So you just flip it over, stick it back in gently, let it lay flat, and then take your back housing and just clip it back together like so. Make sure all the pins are clipped together, and then you just put your screws back in, tighten those down, get those in, and then your 4 screws on the side that connect it to the dash bezel, and then stick it back in your car.